Now, what we could do, after you've made your notes and determined what level you want to give the parent, then you have a profile, and that allows you to summarize, to very quickly kind of draw your lines. And then this will help you, compare, if where you see weaknesses and strengths. And again, it's your clinical judgment, what you want to do about that. Is this a real area of need where you want to recommend some intervention, or in the context of the whole thing, or the nature of the child, or whatever? Yeah, it's a relative weakness, but I really don't think this is something I want to pay a lot of attention to. So that's your clinical decision. It also allows you to record more than one. If you are providing intervention for the parent, or the parent is in a training program, you can put more than one on here, and then you can do your comparison. Just do it in different colors. We'll have one in red and one in green, and then compare to see if there's any change.
Dr. Litz, for the school age child, because most of us are school age, we're not preschool.
Not preschool, yeah.
What activities, and if we could get the parent in, what activities would you recommend we do with the child, have the parent do with the child in our office?
You could probably tell me that better than. There's always homework, having them work on homework together.
If parent might struggle with the homework, that certainly wouldn't be something we would want to.
Yeah.
Because parents aren't always capable of doing the work themselves. So, is there anything that
let's problem solve that together. What would be an age appropriate sort of parent-child interaction, child-specific way that you can, as long you can process it in the same way through these classes. So I think it's always interesting to see the parents in interaction with their children. It's finding a situation to set up where they're comfortable, but you want to see the parent in a mediational role. That's the key. There has to be it has to be out of balance. So you have to have somebody who's the expert and the apprentice. So that's the important element of it. And then how do they function in the role of the expert? And then how does the apprentice react to that? So whatever task you're going to use between them, just try to think of it. And there's got to be that. It's not two equals. It has to be a little bit out of balance. And then there's the whole issue of can the child accept mediation from the parent? In adolescence, maybe not so much. Maybe that's the central issue.
Yeah, exactly. This is interesting because this leads me to think, that sometimes the problem is not accepting the fact that you're the apprentice.
So, I've got a good one for you. You have the parent watch the parent trying to teach the kid how to drive. You'll see lots of things there. During the course of dynamic assessment, it's for us to look at ourselves.
If I wanted to invite a teacher in, let's say she's working with the student that she's referring on her prep period.
Yeah.
And then invite them in to do the I could use this.
Yeah, it's very flexible. And before I thought of doing the teacher scale, this is what I was using in the classroom and wherever I was. But I think you'll find it, if you look at the teacher scale, I think you'll just find it more appropriate for looking at the teacher in relation to the group. It'll just feel more. It's in the early childhood assessment book, so maybe.
But it can be used with older children as well?
Any teacher in any classroom with any task, as long as the teacher's in the role of mediator, sure. Okay, but I want to be clear that I want to get us back to thinking about dynamic assessment, because in that situation, we're the ones that have to be looked at. We have to look at ourselves. Are we doing mediation, during the course of the assessment? Because that really defines what makes it dynamic. And so I want to, bring it full circle back to there. But, all these things are part of our general comprehensive assessment process, and I think it's useful to look at all the mediators' environment. And, I've done so many of these projects. I have done this with another student in Puerto Rico, we have cross-cultural information. We have information about mothers and fathers in their interactions with children in Puerto Rico. Nellie Zambrana's work down there. So we have some cross-cultural information. Again, I just had another thought lingering there that just escaped, but it will reappear sometime. Okay, I want to make sure that we cover the bases this morning so that we can switch to the ACFS. Well, we're not totally switching, but I want to introduce the ACFS this afternoon. So, and we're building a curriculum-based dynamic assessment is where I want to kind of get us back to. And we were looking at the child and the task in terms of the processes. We're looking at ourselves as mediators to provide the intervention. And then there's a whole ton of information in there that would be much too much to throw at you right now about planning, you're mediating to the processes. So let's see. Okay, well this is planning, we talked about what you actually have to spend time thinking about if you're designing your own curriculum-based dynamic assessment, to think about certainly these three, and then you've already got this built in. If you have a pre-test and a post-test, you just present that to the child. So, what are you going to? What it's for meaning? What are you going to point out? You've decided on your task. You've got some materials. What are you going to say to the child? What do they need to do? What do they have to notice about these materials that are important for them to be competent in that? What are you going to highlight? Okay. How are you going to connect the task that you're doing to other things in the child's life? You want to help the child to make those bridges. Some children can come up with their own bridges. Sometimes you have to be more out there and provide the bridging for them. Certainly, the task regulation. You're going to tell them, what the directions are, and you want to think in terms of, what are the best strategies for working with this kind of a task. So this is going to help them be planful and metacognitive, and you really want to address that. And then how you're going to communicate what they have learned. You want the child to leave the situation with increased confidence and with a feeling that they are a learner, and you're presenting them with the evidence. This is what you did before, this is what you're doing now, you have changed, and you are able to change. Very, very highly reinforcing to the child. That's feedback, praise with feedback also. Okay. Okay, I have some forms that help you make that plan. So if you look through the manual, then what the real trick is to mediate to the processes, to understand the process demands of the task, and then to figure out, what mediations are appropriate. That's where the real work of the assessment is.
Essentially, this is our intervention menu.
Yeah.
This is our...
Yeah, but you don't have to do you see there are 12
Depending on the process.
Yeah, there are 12 things on there. You really only need to think of 4 for your actual plan of what you're going to say. Okay, now we're going to sit down and do this dynamic assessment. What am I going to do? You're really only thinking about 4 of those. Trying to bring together, the process and the mediation information. So if the you've said, I'm targeting metacognition, this child is struggling with metacognition. Okay, I'm going to select a task that requires metacognition. Okay, let's say you have a book report to do for class. So let's think in terms of, you need a plan in order to do a book report. How do you make a plan? We need to think in terms of a sequence for what do you do first, what do you do next, what do you do, and then working with the child in terms of making a plan for doing this book report. So you want to, once you've targeted the process, and then that's what you're working on, in conversation
Okay,
with the child.
I don't understand. How did you determine? Was there an assessment portion that determines that you're going to assess metacognition and not, let's say, memory or
No, through,
social emotional functioning or?
no, this is through your work. You've done your comprehensive assessment. You're doing a lot of work with the child. You're observing the child. You're getting interview information. Through what you're learning about the child, you are trying to determine, the teacher refers the child because they're not learning to read. They're 12 years old and they're still not learning to read. So you look at your analysis of reading and looking at the child with how does the child reading, and then you're trying to target which process is the problem with reading. So I would give the child reading tests. I would watch what the child is doing in the classroom with reading. Where's the struggle here? What's the process? At 12 years old, it's unlikely to be a perceptual issue. Is it more likely to be comprehension, which is kind of simultaneous thinking, trying to get all the elements. So then I'm going to target simultaneous thinking and how to get this child to be a better comprehender. There's some ideas on strategies, Michael Posner's work. There are strategies out there for how to help children with comprehension problems. One that I've built into the ACFS is model building, building for stories. Then you in your work and awareness of the child need to be thinking in terms of where's the processing problem here? These are the tasks they're having a problem with. What about that seems to be difficult? Is it they're paying attention to it? Is it seeing the perceptual properties of it? And then that helps you.
Is there a specific task that you used or have used in the past that identifies metacognition as a specific?
Yeah, for a lot of it is through observation and what people tell me. At home, the parent said this child is totally disorganized. The parent, you look at his desk and it looks like a storm went through there. There's the brief scale of executive rating scale. It's a useful rating scale to target, get teacher and parent to complete that rating scale. I forget exactly. It's an acronym, BRIEF. The EF is executive function.
So in other words, so you do a rating scale, and then in addition, you would do some dynamic assessment test in order to confirm the results of the brief? Is that what I'm understanding?
No, that's to inform me where the processing problem is. I mean, if everyone's saying this child is disorganized, then you look at his paper and it's a mess, then I'm saying, okay, this child is having metacognitive planning problems. I would confirm it, document it with something like the brief, so I have some scores to back that up. Mm-hmm. And then I would say, okay, well, what does this child, in order to become more organized for putting together a report for this type of task, what does this child need to be able to do? I've identified the process as metacognition or something else. All right, so what are the ways to help children become more organized in their paperwork? And I would start work with the child in those terms. This is where I see you're having the greatest difficulty, and we have the evidence of what the problem. Let's try out some things to get you better organized. Outlining, drawing lines, making lists, whatever. There are things out there that if you're working with the child in the area of planning, so yeah.
I kind of struggle to wrapping my mind around that because I feel like a lot of what we do is almost in secret. So it's kind of like, okay, we've got our tests and we're not really giving feedback to the child or hearing. So it's almost like switching your train of thought from that to I'm just going to be straight with you.
Yeah.
I know you have this problem. Mm-hmm. Let's figure out. And it is kind of weird. It's
a change. It's definitely a change. Yeah.
To think about it in that way.
Yeah. and the kids will find it. They're not used to people
I
just
bet,
discussing
yeah.
those things with them. Yeah,
That's
that's
going to be doing a lot of things today, like answering questions and
And
working
working
with blocks.
Yeah,
So
right.
really doing my part.
You've all got the script. Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
all they
Yeah.
know about why.
Okay. Yeah, and this turns into, okay, we did that script. Now I'm noticing you're really struggling with this sort of thing. Let's go
Right.
back and think about that. What's making it hard for you? Okay, that what I was thinking when I was watching you was that maybe made it hard. So let's try it a different way, or give you another chance to do it. Take your time this time. Look again. Did you notice this and this about it? So it moves you into an instructional conversation that's sort of problem solving targeted, and the kids love it because it is respectful. They're being taken seriously. They're part of the. They're part of it. They're not. It's not something being done to them. It's something being done with them. They know they have a problem. Nobody's sitting them down and saying, "Let's work together and solve this," and have a strategy for helping you with it. So it is putting it out there. Yeah, it's very much a different kind of a conversation and a different kind of experience. Okay, so we want to if we're doing this mediational thing. We are interested in the learner response scale, the response to mediation scale. These are the components that are on that, because we are interested in profiling that as well. So and these are scaled, so there are scores that go in there. Are we seeing strategic problem solving? Are we seeing task-related self-talk? There's a lot of research on the importance of self-talk. Those of you who are familiar with Vygotsky's work. But the important thing is that it's task-related self-talk, not just somebody sitting there, talking to themselves. Essentially not hallucinating, right? The interactivity of the child, the responsiveness of the child. Do they understand, when you're trying to get them to do something? We're trying to help them develop more self-regulation. When you challenge them, how do they respond to that? Are they able to use the adult as a resource? You put materials in front of them, and are they interested at all in the materials? And that was really interesting to watch. If we think of the little boy in that interaction, we're not asking him to do any problem solving, but we certainly saw very good interactivity. We saw he was very responsive. This wasn't really an issue, but he certainly understood what he needed to do. He was fine with his self-regulation. He responded with a little anxiety to challenge. Mom was able to keep him within that challenge zone. And he certainly was able to use his mother as a resource, and he liked most of the materials, except he was getting a little over-challenged and a little bored with that book that, with all the naming that he was doing. So, but on the whole, he certainly was enthusiastic about most of the materials. So, it helps to give us some glasses to look at the learner's role in this interaction. And that scale, that's also in the early childhood assessment book or somewhere. Is there a profile? I think there's a profile. All right, we can look at a sample mediation. If we take a spelling task and we say, how are we going to mediate to this spelling task? So this gives you some idea. First, you want to determine, are they within the child's reading range? Otherwise, pick a different list. Okay, if the child's having difficulty with spelling, then you have to kind of parse out, is a child, there are perceptual aspects of it. Is the child paying attention to the appropriate distinctive features of the words? Is the child having an issue of the order of the letters? Now, I give you ideas for how to mediate, because I try to do as much for you as possible. So, if you've identified attention as the process, and how would you mediate change in relation to attention? And a lot of times it's bringing the child's attention to that they need mediation in this area. But I have tried to provide a lot of the ideas for mediation for you, so that's embedded in your literature there. And go through the different processes and then the mediations to help those processes. A lot of some components that you want to communicate to the child there. And we don't have time to go through that. A lot of question, and in relation to reasoning, you want to force them to do some problem solving, so asking them questions. You want to teach them to self-talk. If they don't self-talk, you want to teach them to self-talk and not be embarrassed about it. Sometimes parents need to be told that's okay if kids are talking to themselves. And now everybody's walking down the street talking to themselves, right? It's talking into those phones. Okay, so these are the mediations. Okay, thinking. And then the scoring, we talked about. The scoring depends upon the nature of the task. Sometimes you're going to use a curriculum-based test. Sometimes you're just going to score items of homework. You can use qualitative ratings, or depending on the homework assignment, to develop your own rubrics. Okay. All right. I just want to quickly talk about the culturally diverse issue, and then report writing, and then that will finish off the survey. It's the survey, the brief rapid survey of the curriculum-based dynamic assessment. So dynamic assessment really actually took off because of concerns about misdiagnosis, and it was mainly concerns about culture and effects of culture on test results. And then so it's been embraced as a response to that problem, as a way of getting around the problem of misdiagnosing kids. I'm going to keep pressing any mediation for perceptual mediation here. So it's been found especially useful for individuals from the linguistic and cultural minority backgrounds. And we have, there's research. Liz Pena has been making great contributions, in that area. And it provides information that provides learner and any placement can do. It's not meant to address placement issues, although it can, as we did with the gifted. That was the problem that was presented to me. I thought it through in the gifted research, and we could use it for that. But that's not what motivated most of us to get into dynamic assessment. It's mainly to provide information about what to do with learners in a learning situation. And it specifically is targeting this capacity performance gap. Trying to make performance more representative, to learn more about the child's capacity and go beyond just watching performance. So as I said, there's research. Liz has done a lot of this work on differentiating difference from deficiency, because kids, just because they come from a different language, shouldn't be deprived of services. They genuinely have a language problem within their difference that needs to be targeted.
Dr. Litz, do you have any examples of that?
Of the difference rather than...
Yeah, do you have any examples of reports that show exactly how a dynamic assessment was able to differentiate between deficiency and difference?
You'd have to refer you to her research. She's got lots of that. Okay. Liz Pena, P-E-N-A.
Do you know what university she's associated?
Yeah, University of Texas, Austin.
Okay.
Yeah, she's been working on that since I knew her at Temple. She's got a lot of information on that. And then she and Ron Gillum wrote a chapter on the Big Fat Book that shows you some of the work that's being done in the language area. But her dissertation was exactly this. So if you read the procedure part of her dissertation, which she's written up, it's even on my list because some of it my name is attached to it. If you look on if you go into ResearchGate, I think she may be on ResearchGate as well. You can find her publications. I don't know if she's uploaded the article, but on my list I have 2 articles I wrote with her. One is related to her dissertation, and it'll give you the specific procedure that she used in order to do that.
Great.
Okay? Yeah. Okay. Nature. Okay, and this is a big issue. This switch from, going through your little script with the kids about what you're going to be doing together, the switch from that into, okay, let's sit and talk about your learning here, and let's see if we can come up with some ideas. Okay, that's a whole lot more comfortable for them than, say, walking in, the stranger's throwing all this stuff, now do this, now do that. So it creates a much more relaxed situation for them that crosses cultures. I mean, most people, it's not culture specific. Most people from most cultures are more comfortable in a kind of a chit-chatty, relaxed, let's talk about you kind of situation. And so that's one of the things that makes it better. Okay, we have perceptual issues here. Okay, I'm not going to read. There's a lot of writing here. I'm not going to read through. It's in your book. What was pointed out earlier about using nonverbal measures, we've already discussed. That's not necessarily the way to go. It's not necessarily an improvement in the assessment of the children. And the fact that even that, who is it? There are Reynolds, Cecil Reynolds, some other people out there are very quick to point out, well, when we test the kids across cultures, the tests are measuring the same thing in all kids from all cultures. They're measuring the same thing. Well, that does not mean, even if we agree that they are measuring the same thing, that doesn't mean that the cultural experience values or gives opportunities for that within the culture. One culture may highly value memory, being able to recite long, lengthy things from oral communication, and the kids may really excel in being able to communicate their stories of the culture orally, but pay no attention or little or no attention to the written word. So you give them a test, well, the test may very well measure the child's ability to write, and the child may have a genuine deficit according to that. But what does that mean? How do you interpret that? So we have to be really careful, about the overvaluing the psychometrics. It's the illusion of precision, and what the numbers mean is, can be quite different. Okay, so this is further. You can read that. I've done cross-cultural work in the Netherlands with the ACFS, and so here's Pena, but it has the little nya over. Oh, there we go. we got one. Okay, and Achilles Iglesias in Temple is her mentor, and he does a lot of work in the area as well. Carol Robinson's in Yartu. She's in California. She's a school psychologist. And she is also Spanish speaking, and she works with the American Indian population. So she has a lot of writing in the area of applying dynamic assessment with the First Nation. Well, with Canada, they're First Nations. I was told, I just went to Santa Fe. They say we want to be called Indians, so whatever jargon you use. We've got lots of information from Israel, and so there is some cross-cultural information available. Okay, now writing reports. I don't think, because it often comes up. This is not news to you. We all know, the components of writing good reports. Probably we vary greatly on that, but that's a list that should be familiar. Now, if we're using dynamic assessment, what does the dynamic assessment add to our writing reports? It's going to provide you with information about how the responsiveness of the learner. Was there evidence of change? How much? What made it happen or not? So this is information you're not going to get from other sources. What did you have to do to induce the change? What are the implications for the home, the school? Okay, you do have information about strengths and needs. Of course, you could say, well, I've got my WISC profile and other things will give me information about that, yes, but not in the depth that doing the dynamic assessment would, because you're watching the child in the process of learning. So you're, what looks like a strength or a weakness on a psychometric profile becomes an area to explore in your dynamic assessment. So it's much more in depth than you would get from other approaches. You're looking, this is transfer, you're looking for transfer, what's your evidence on that, what worked to produce changes or not. Okay, you want to close that gap. Are there issues, cultural, linguistic issues that are affecting the child's learning? The teacher who says this child is a master of English, and well, no, not a master of English. You have to watch the language environment. Okay, so the way I might write my reports, this is the same old. What I do, this is a little different, and this has nothing to do with dynamic assessment. It just is a way I've changed my report writing. In the reasons for referral section, I ask specific questions, and that can come from the teacher, from the parent, from myself as I'm working with the child. So I've listed a series of questions here that are the assessment will address. Then, with the magic of the computer and the cut and paste, I take those questions and I copy them and I paste them in the recommendations. I don't write a summary. That's my other clue, because yeah. So whatever's at the end of the report, usually recommendations, and there should be pages of that. I paste those same questions at the bottom. And that's my way of forcing myself to address the referral issues. Because we begin with the referral questions, I've done the assessment, now I'm going to give you information from the assessment that addresses the questions that were asked. So I find that I learned to do that late in my career, but I like it very much as a format. And here, here's how I present. This is what I write up. I want to be assessing, screening, and watching any of these. I could say, I may only do from observation. If attention doesn't seem to be a major problem, and I'm just doing it from observing the child, I may say, child had no problem in this area. Memory, on the other hand, is an area that was related to the referral questions. It's an area I targeted for further exploration. This is how I did it. This is what seemed to help, what didn't seem to help, so I would spend a lot of time talking about that. And so I would either dismiss these areas that, didn't seem to be a problem, child's fine, and, English is the first language, fine in language, so I didn't spend much time with that. So I would spend time talking and addressing each of these areas. I would spend the most time talking about the process that I targeted for dynamic assessment. As I said, I don't do dynamic assessment for everything all the time. It's not appropriate, it's much too time consuming, but it is a useful thing for going in depth for what, to come up with, to close that gap between assessment and intervention. And that's the conclusions and recommendations. No summary. The reason why I don't do a summary, are you required to do a summary? Is that the form here, or no summary?
I think we all kind of write our own.
Yeah, because I find the way, no matter what you say, if you give them a full scale IQ, that's the child. That number's in the head, and the only way to get people to not think in terms of the full scale IQ is not to see it. The same thing about the summary. If there's a summary, the eyes go directly there, and I want them to read the report, you know. Plain and simple. I'm trying to make the report accessible, easy to read, talky, but I don't want you to just go to the summary. I want you to read the whole thing. Okay, there are issues, you know, it's not that dynamic assessment isn't the answer to everything. There, you know, I discussed some issues and limitations with it, and you know, that's it.